back to the tavern, and now you're in the kitchen of the tavern. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to showcase how I make sourdough bread. Because during the lockdown, I managed to, connect with a friend of mine that had a 160-year-old starter that came from the 49ers, the gold fields of California, and I got it. He'd kept it alive for the last 4 or 5 years, and I've had it alive now for just over 2 months, and made quite a bit of sourdough bread, and I've slowly been working on perfecting my recipe for it. And there's just dozens of recipes, dozens of ways to do it. This one's a little different. It's stolen a little piece from one website or from one YouTube channel for another YouTube channel, but this is the way the Rogue's Tavern makes the sourdough bread. So what we're going to do is start to showcase everything. First off, I've got for you my lovely starter. This starter here, I fed it this morning, had it all nice and bubbly. Everything's looking really good. Got a nice classic jar for it. If only you could smell that. It smells delish. It's really good stuff. So there's enough there for me to make a loaf. I'm due to make some bread, and I'm going to go through all the different things I do to create my sourdough. It may be a recipe for you. It may not be a recipe for you. Who knows? Let's see how it goes. Okay, first things first. You need yourself a digital scale. Let's make sure I'm always keeping in frame here. Okay, first things first, need a digital scale. Need to get some flour out. Get my flours. I use a couple of different flours for my recipe. Need a mixing bowl. Need a mixing bowl. Need some lukewarm water. Okay, got the water. We'll need salt, something to measure it into. The joys of sourdough is that it only requires flour, water, and salt. So first thing you got to do, turn on your digital scale, put your bowl on top and zero it out. Tear out the bowl. Now, the recipe I use calls for 138 grams of water. So we pour in our 138 grams of water into the bowl. (138 grams of water). Then it calls for 250 grams of the starter. So get the starter out. First we want to test the starter a little bit, make sure it's all good. Test to make sure it floats a little bit in here. Yep, it's all floaty. Okay, so we need 150 grams of starter. Tear that out again so that you have a zero scale. Or 250 grams of starter is what I'm after. 250 grams of starter. I get out 250 grams. Okay, There's 250 grams of starter. So you end up with that in there. Then what you do is you mix your starter into your water. Really, really good. Just get it all mixed up and blended. Okay. Any more? Put that back on. Tear it out. Now, need 225 grams of flour. $225 grams of flour. 200. A little bit more. Oop. Take some out. There we go. 225 grams of flour. Now, because I like a little wheat flour in here, I add 25 grams of wheat flour. So tear that out again. And 225 or 25 grams of flour. Wheat flour. Okay, 25 grams of wheat flour. Okay, then you take a wooden spoon of some sort and you just mix this mess into a shaggy mess. Just mix that all up into a shaggy mess. And then what you have to do is you have to let it sit for about 30 minutes after you've mixed up your shaggy mess. Because what you're doing is you're letting the flour auto-lease, as it's called. In other words, you're letting the water and the flour become completely and totally moisturized all the way through. Because when you first mix it, it's not. There's bits and pieces and stuff in the middle that's not completely saturated. But by letting it sit, it saturates it all the way through. This, your finger's kind of wet here, and push that off the stirring spoon so it doesn't stick to your fingers. There we go. And we let that sit for a little while. Set a timer for 30 minutes, and I will come back in 30 minutes. Okay, I did forget here, one of the things you want to do when you move on, while that's doing that, you can measure out your flour or your salt. And in my case here, this takes 10 grams of salt. So I measure out my 10 grams of salt and set that in a bowl. And make sure you don't over salt, because salty bread tastes horrible. It really does. Let's try that again since we got it wrong. Alright, try that again. 10 grams of salt. Okay, out of the way. Now the other thing I do is I like to feed my starter immediately afterwards so I can then let it rise a bit and put it away. Now I took 250 grams out. I should put back that same amount, but because it's going to sit for a week, I don't. What I do is I put back another 75 grams of flour and another 75 grams of water back into it. So let's add the water first. Okay, so we're going to go 75 and 75 is 150, so that's what we're after. We just want to give it something to be a little bit healthy. Make sure it stays healthy. These are pretty hard to kill, but why take chances, right? Always best not to. Okay, so I need 75 grams of flour. Now what I've got here is a mixture of about the same proportions of wheat flour and regular flour that I use to keep my thing fed. Now you can use any flour you want to keep your starter alive. Just the biggest thing is that if you want to change that flour to something completely different, you got to do it several days in a row to get that strength of that particular flour that you want. At least that's what I've heard. I don't know that for certain, but that's what I've heard. All right. So okay, that's there. Now I move the rubber band down so I know where its level is, and that way when it starts to grow I know that it's actually growing. There we go. I don't have enough stuff to do a time lapse, but I think I'll try that one time in the future. Alright, so now I'll be back in about 30 minutes. Okay, here we are. Now it's time to add the salt, do what's called the fold and slap. Now I've changed my fold and slap method. The fold and slap method was shown to me to do it on a counter, but you can do it in a bowl, and it's a whole lot nicer to do in a bowl. Now your hands are going to get sticky because this dough is really sticky. Okay, so what I do with it is I add my salt, and then I mix it in, and then I start pulling and and stretching, and you end up with some really sticky dough. And you do this for about 5 minutes or so. Now to avoid having to have you go through the process of sitting there watching me do this, I'm gonna go sit down like I usually do, watch another YouTube video, and go through the stretch and fold for my 5 minutes of time till the dough is about ready, and then come show you what's up next. Okay, so I'll be right back to you in a few minutes. Okie dokie, I've done the pull and stretch. Pull, stretch, fold in the bowl. You do that until the consistency is hard to beat. You do it. I do it between 5 and 10 minutes. You know, I discovered accidentally one night. I used to do a pretty precise 5 minutes, and then I discovered accidentally when I wasn't paying attention to the clock, I ended up doing it for about 10 minutes. And all of a sudden I had a completely different texture in my dough. And the texture is hard to describe. It's just a really soft consistency to it, and it doesn't stick as hard as it did when you first start. And that's one of the big things I discovered with it. Now you still end up with a bunch of stuff on your hands. So that'll come off in a couple of minutes. So what you need next, a little bit of flour. A little bit of flour on a surface. And then you got to scrape the dough out of the bowl. Get it all out of the bowl. Flop it on the flour. Now, the original recipe I said, said to use very little flour, but I've discovered that a certain amount of flour to really help get it less sticky came out to the perfect kind of consistency I want. This is something you have to experiment with when you're making your own sourdough. What consistency do you want the dough to be? And that's going to vary depending on what you're doing and where you're at and who you are and how much you like it. So basically what you're going to do now is you're going to do the 1/3 fold, and you're going to do this 3 times. You know, and I try to get as much dough off my fingers as I can in this process because, you know, every little bit counts to me. I don't want to let that sweet, sweet sourdough go to waste. So I pick all the dough off my fingers, get it rolled off there. It's not as sticky. Add a little flour to it. Get it to roll right off. And then I reincorporate it back into the dough ball itself. And there we go. Yeah, that's a pretty good chunk, man. That was a nice little chunk ball. That's a decent sized chunk that stuck to my fingers. And there we go. It's like making bread sometimes. You get a little bit messy. So anyway, bring this up. Roll it all together, create a ball. Okay, then what you got to do, flip it, and you want to 1/3 fold here, 1/3 fold there, 1/3 fold there, 1/3 fold there, flip it back over, and then roll it into a tight ball. Now, this little job here, the tight ball, is something where you cup your hands under, tuck it, pull it towards you, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a very high ball on here. Okay, and then you take that, let that sit, take a piece of plastic wrap, cover it up for 10 minutes, and then you come back to it. So I'll be back in 10 minutes. Now this is one thing here where I am pretty consistently on time for. I got 10 minutes on this, then I do the exact same thing 2 more times, and then we will move it into the proofing bowl, which will then go into the refrigerator overnight. Because what I found, instead of trying to do my bread all in one day, it's really nice to do up your bread early in the evening or in the late afternoon, depending on your mood. You get it all ready, get it in the fridge, and let it sit and proof in the fridge or ferment, because it won't proof very well in the fridge. As it cools down, it'll really slow it down. So stick it in the fridge, leave it overnight, and first thing in the morning when you get out of bed and you're wandering for your cup of coffee, or your tea, or your hot cup of water and honey like I like, whatever it is, you pull that out, set it on the counter, and let it rise for 3 hours maybe. And after 3 hours, then you start the oven. Get the oven hot, and we'll be showing you all of that process. Okay, so we'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay. Timer's gone off into the first 10-minute cycle. Now the one thing you will want is you will want one of these, or whatever other kind of scraper you can get. Use this, loosen it up, flip it over. Okay, take it, 1/3, 1/3, and we need a little more flour on here, don't I? My flour, no, there it is. Let's try that again. Okay, 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and because I messed it up, we're going to do an extra third here. Then you flip it back over and roll it into a bowl or a ball one more time. Get it as tight as you possibly can. This is the one thing I'm taking some time learning to perfect, because that helps determine the rise in the shape of the bread from what I've discovered. Okay, then you set it up for another 10 minutes, so I will be back. Okay, we're back again. 10 minutes gone. Now for the final 1/3 fold. So pick this up and over, a little bit of flour, 1/3 up, 1/3 up, 1/3 up, 1/3 up, flip it. Actually, there's one more 1/3 fold after this. Flour, flour, 1/3. Oh no, that's it. 3 1/3s. Now what you're going to do is you get it into the bowl you want. And once that's all really quite good, you'll cover it up and let it sit here and ferment for about an hour and a half. And then we'll put it into the proofing bowl. And I've kind of created a unique proofing bowl. I'll show you that when we get started on it. But we're going to leave this for an hour and a half, and I will be back in an hour and a half time to show you what I do. Okay, we're back. It's been almost 2 hours. I did say an hour and a half, but it's supposed to be 1.5 in size, or 2 to 3 hours. Depends on what you're doing. So you can see it's growing up quite nicely. Looking pretty good. So what you do at this point here, now before we do the 1/3 fold, I'm going to explain a proofing bowl. That's a bowl that you would proof it in. Now this is a smaller version of the bowl that I mixed it in. But one of the things I've noticed about proofing bowls is they all have a cloth of some sort in them. And since I didn't have anything as fancy as that, what I did was I found a towel that I'd never used for anything. Nice and clean and bright and shiny. And it's a cotton towel, really thin. And what it was a racing towel that was given to me when I finished a race one time. It's a Brooks running towel. And I kind of like the idea of like, hey, this thing will work really well. So I take this in, I have it coated in flour. I add a bit more flour to it each time I use it, and get flour all through the cloth, so it doesn't stick to the cloth. You just work that in there, and it keeps it from sticking. It doesn't stick to the bowl or nothing else. Because what we'll be doing tomorrow is we will be cooking it in my Dutch oven. So what you do at this point, once you've got that ready, you then take it, flip it over, and you do the 1/3 fold again on both sides. Flip it back over. Give it a little bit more flour on the thing, so it doesn't stick. And then you take it and bring it into your last ball. A little flour here sticking in my hands. Okay. And you can see there's air pockets forming in it now. So that's when I know it's looking really good. And you pick it up and you set it top down. Set it top down into your bowl. And you set it in there. Give it a slight dusting of flour. Making sure it doesn't stick on the sides or anything. Then what I do is I fold the cloth over it. Take that piece of plastic wrap I've been using for everything else. Put that on top of it. And into the fridge it goes. Until tomorrow morning. And I'll follow up tomorrow morning as we pull it out and start to prepare it. Okay, that's all I got. We'll talk to you in the morning. Okay, well, good morning. I pulled the sourdough back out of the fridge to warm up. Once you get it back out of the fridge, basically what you do is take your plastic wrap off, uncover the wrap cloth if you happen to use that method. If not, maybe you have a different one. Then what I do, simply take another cloth, set it over its top. Now it's got to sit for 2 to 3 hours, maybe 4, it depends on your mood, and start warming up. And about an hour before it's ready to go in the oven is when I start warming up the oven, and I start warming the oven up incrementally. That way it gets a nice even heat all the way through it. And I start about half an hour ahead getting the cast iron Dutch oven brought up the temperature, because you want that Dutch oven fully heated up before you actually do this. And I'll show you all of those things as soon as it is time. So let's carry on and we shall prevail. Dun, 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 dun. Whatever you want to call it. Okay, so we're just about ready to put it into the oven. I had to take off for an hour, so it's gotten a little extra rise than it should have, so it'll be a little bit more puffy, which is fine. But now what I got to do is I got to get the oven turned on, and I got to get the cast iron skillet, or the cast iron Dutch oven all ready. Hopefully it's clean and ready to go from last time. Oh, perfect. Dutch oven's ready and perfect. It's already cleaned. I must have cleaned it last time I used it. That's good. Get the Dutch oven. No oil or anything on your Dutch oven. Basically, we just take the Dutch oven and we'll put it into the oven down here. Put the Dutch oven in here. Leave the lid a little askew. Don't leave it so solidly tight when you're warming it up. Let that warm up. Bring the oven up to 500 degrees. And once that's all up and ready, then we shall proceed to move the bread into the Dutch oven and into the oven. Okay, so we'll be back in a few after the oven's all warmed up. Okay, here we go. It's time to get the bread into the cast iron skillet, or cast iron Dutch oven. Get your Dutch oven out. Nice and warm, it's hot, 100 degrees. Set the lid off to the side. Get your bread out. Get your bread out. Take it. Gently lift it out. Get your cloth off of it. Take it, plop it inside. This one's going to look a little odd, I can see that now. And try to brush off some of the flour that has stuck to it. And put your lid. I think this one's going to be not as good as most of them should be. You get that into the oven. But we shall see how it's going to turn out. Set timer for 20 minutes, because you want 20 minutes with the lid on at 500. Then what happens at the end of 20 minutes, we take the lid off and cook it for another 20 minutes, and it's done. That's all it is. Okay, so let's see how it goes. Timer is set, it's running. We'll be back to you as soon as timer goes off. Okay. Yeah, no. All right, so it's been 20 minutes now. Time to take the lid off of the Dutch oven and get a quick glimpse of how good that loaf is. Hey, it's not too bad. That looking actually pretty decent down in there. And yeah, that's it. So now we got to stick it back in there for another 20 minutes to get it all browned up and finish cooking, and we're good to go. All right, so I'll catch you back here on the camera when it's hit the 20-minute mark. All right, it looks like I made a major screw up because I was distracted. I forgot to turn the oven down. Forgot that one key thing. I left the oven up at 500 degrees, and this is what you get. As horrible as it is. It's probably still edible, but I will probably redo this film. I gotta get that on a rack. It's a little bit browner than it should be, but it's probably going to be alright. Still be edible. At any rate, there we have it. Sourdough bread when a mistake happens and you haven't paid attention or you're delirious on what's up. Good thing I checked on it a little early because it definitely got done. So it's a little browner than usual, but probably going to be alright. We'll check on it again in another hour. Okay, this will be take 2. Since everything else is going a little crazy today, why shouldn't this? So this will be titled, How Not to Make the Best Sourdough in the World. But it's a good lesson in how to make sourdough when you actually get it right. And I had gotten it right many times. So anyway, what we're going to do, take a look at this. This is the bread. Came out. Looks really good. It's nicely cooled. Good crust. Thick. A little browner than it should be. Feels pretty good. Nice and fluffy. I'm betting it's really good and fluffy on the inside. So we're going to cut her open and have a look-see at what we got. Keep the finger away from the bread knife. I've already got a band-aid from the bread knife. Let's get off a nice slice here. Crust is really good. Hey, look at that. It's got good lift, isn't as much, but it's got good texture. It's nice and cooked on the inside. Seems like it's going to be very tasty. Let's find out. We need a little butter. A little butter on the bread. Nothing like bread and butter. All right, a little bit of butter on the bread. Well, it is good. So we'll see how all this comes out, and I have to do another video at a later time. Next time I'm making sourdough bread, I'll do another video and see if I can get it more correct. That's all I got for you. Now for the Rogue's Tavern. Make sure you take a couple minutes, subscribe to the channel. I believe it's on this side. No, it's on this side. Over here. Follow the breadstick. Yeah, boom, 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 boom. Hit the buttons. Subscribe to the channel. Check out the website, theroguestavern.com. And talk to you guys next time. Bye.